Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Secret Art of Business. And today I have Neal Bell with me. And Neal is the owner of White Rock Media. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Catherine.
I would like to start by talking about White Rock Media because you have had it for 24 plus years, which is crazy. That's like a whole lifetime. Let's talk about how did it start? And well, you know what? Let's talk about what it is that you do, and then we'll talk about how it started.
Yeah, I manage media placements for advertisers. So I create plans and I negotiate rates and I draft and implement schedules on behalf of my clients who tend to be local market advertisers here in Central Ohio. Over the years, I've done multi-market advertising work, for companies who operate in multiple media markets. I've done regional stuff. I've done national stuff. At the end of the day, the math is very similar. It just depends on how big you're defining the geographic scope of things. I started the business in 1999. It was a time when lots of different marketing services were kind of being unbundled from full service advertising agencies. I realized the sort of economic value of media management services. And I felt like there was a lot of, especially local market advertisers, who were being underserved in terms of there were a lot of computers and information tools becoming available that could really help local market advertisers make more informed media buying decisions so that for every dollar they spent in advertising, they reached more people who looked more like their ideal customer. And so I kind of took an approach that was not dissimilar from financial advisors. For every financial advisor, their clients have different risk tolerances, different appetites for risk, a different way that they're defining success, and that they would configure investment opportunities to sort of match that. I had a similar. I was able to. My clients were similarly diverse in their viewpoints about how they define success, and I had some clients who were willing to kind of bet on new programs and trust that I could help them find value by buying early into things like American Idol and programs that kind of took off like a rocket, but we get in at low rates. Other people were more risk averse. They're like, you know what? The news is on every night. News is consumed kind of habitually. Let's look at that programming as a real consistent kind of deliverer of audience. So there were lots of different variations for how to find an edge in the game of planning and buying media. And then over the years, I've also distinguished what we do on the back end in terms of accounting and reporting. We kind of specialize in what's called co-op advertising, where third parties help subsidize the cost of advertising for the client. So like things like automotive, a lot of car manufacturers will subsidize their dealer network to advertise. Same in television. Local TV stations will place a lot of cable and radio advertising to promote tune-in to programming, and the producers of those programs will help. And so with all of that, there's an extra accounting burden to show proof of performance and that things were bought in line with whatever rules the co-op partner has. So, I didn't want to be a CPA. I have a degree in accounting, and I knew I didn't want to do it.
I was going to bring that up.
But I ended up getting involved in very detail-oriented number crunching, both in terms of audience analysis and in terms of sort of an accounting reporting function.
I was going to bring that up. It's kind of like this little superpower that you have that isn't necessarily front and center, and that you do know numbers as well. So you can really have your clients in that regard to just say, and here's where you're going to get the best return for your dollar.
Yeah, I feel like a fair chunk of my career, I have gone against my natural instincts in terms of, as a kid, I could not sit still, and I did lots of musical theater and choir and stuff, and I ended up, when you get a wife and kids and you have bills to pay, it's like I adjusted my my behavior to sort of match the needs of the moment. But as I've gotten older and more of my obligation to my family has kind of been taken care of, I find that I'm reverting more back to my go with the flow improv self, and I'm enjoying that.
Now you use a great word, which was improv, and I do think that owning a business is a lot of that because you're
Very much
constantly
so.
being thrown the yes ands all the time when it comes to trying to troubleshoot your business. So you were pretty much on a course for doing what you're doing now, but what, bundling all that up, what made you decide to start a business where you could kind of get into this everyday improv of running a company?
I had always had it in the back of my head that I wanted to be my own boss. That was definitely on my mind. I saw my father work for United Parcel Service for 22 years, and
Oh, wow.
kind of as that company matured and became more sophisticated and began, and his leadership was everybody had MBAs. My dad, who was a high school graduate, he did 4 years in the Marine Corps, and that kind of regimentation that he got out of the military really played well to UPS's early culture. The organization kind of became more sophisticated, and they didn't see fit to bring him along after a couple of decades, and so I think I'm of a generation who began to see that the sort of social contract between companies and employees wasn't what it used to be, and so it I remember when I did start White Rock, my dad felt like that was kind of a risky thing.
Yeah.
And I felt kind of the opposite. Like, the risky thing is to trust that some large entity with executive suite that's constantly changing is going to always view me as equally valuable from year to year. So it was kind of just kind of baked into me from the beginning. It was also the advertising agencies that I work for were not super large, and so it wasn't hard to kind of impute the economics, like how much I was contributing to the bottom line single-handedly. And I was like, well, that's seems like a good business. And you sort of couple that with the fact that other people were doing it. They were opening media-only boutiques, and and it all kind of conspired. I was just young and dumb and feisty enough to think I could do it myself. And it really, from a lifestyle perspective, was well timed. We had our first child in 2000. So I had, I wasn't quite as busy when I first started. And so I was able to kind of co-parent with my wife, who is an attorney. So I had exclusive responsibility for our son. I believe it was 2 days a week. He stayed with my parents 2 days a week, and then Lori was home on Fridays.
Oh, that's a pretty good system.
And yeah, it allowed for both of us to kind of stay engaged professionally, but be highly engaged as parents. And
Yeah, and I think sometimes that just the timing works right for that. It's like, you know what, this just feels right, and sometimes all the ducks get in a line, and it just really works out. My story is a little bit similar in that started a business, and then I want to say like 3 years into it, we had a daughter, and it when you can make your own hours, it works out pretty good.
yeah, that is definitely one thing that has always been true, is that um, every waking moment has to be deployed to its highest and best use. And sometimes that's getting your kid off the bus, and sometimes
Yes.
it's you know, auditing a billing package at 11 at night. So it's just like, as long as
Yeah.
as long as you hit deadlines, like, it doesn't matter whether it happened at 8 p.m. or 8 a.m.
Yeah,
Um,
100%
and I
on
think
that.
that kind of fluidity has only gotten stronger over the last 2
Yes, I
decades.
think more people start realizing that that made the most sense. And you give your best when you're in it 100% versus thinking about, I got to get home, or I got to, I got a kid waiting for me at school to be picked up. I mean, it's like, no, it is all set. And I know maybe I have to put in a 10 or 12-hour day, a couple days a week, but it's worth it in the long run, because the
Very much
results aren't
so.
going to be the same anyway.
Very much so. Yes.
Period. And apparently, this was not enough for you to do, because you were also the founder and owner of Maamos Kitchen. Tell us a little
hmm
bit about how that all started.
There, the internet has changed a ton about how we consume media and how we buy advertising. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in addition to that, uh, I spent a good decade, I would say from 2004 to 2014, I really aggressively was trying to grow White Rock. And um, and and I did so with reasonable success, but I would describe that decade as 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. Like, it wasn't really, I tried to turn it into a scalable business, but I came to realize that it was never going to be a lumber mill. It was at best going to be a custom carpentry shop. Every client's needs were unique. So the systems and processes that you put in place for that client were kind of unique to that client. It wasn't kind of universally applicable. And so you ended up just, and that's great. It's just, that's what it was.
Right.
And, and I felt like, uh, you know, it finally, I was very frustrated. Like, I just wanted to go up and to the right with all the revenues and profits, and it was much shaggier than that. And um, I just I had a lot of negative self talk because I wasn't able to consistently grow it. And it finally, I pressed pause one day, and I said, Neal, maybe you're a better jockey than you realize. Maybe it's the horse. And so, like, at that point, I said, okay, let's press pause on all business development for the media buying business. And let's take out a blank sheet of paper, and let's start thinking about other businesses that might have different traits that allow it to be more of that consistent up and to the right growth
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
idea. And that's ultimately how I landed on Maamos Kitchen.
Well, food can be kind of risky, though. So I'm really curious as to what made
Mm-hmm.
you decide to do this.
Well, I felt like I had a unique angle. Um, it was born out of my flexibility as an entrepreneur in the decade prior, because I was the more flexible parent in the house. I was usually the person preparing dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and with the kids as they aged, getting into extracurricular activities, that dinner had to happen within a very defined time frame each evening. And so I got pretty good at planning and executing dinner within a tight time frame. And and I would talk to like the other soccer parents on the sidelines about what are they having for dinner. They were impressed often that we even ate before practice as opposed to after practice. And I just thought, I'd see some of my boys' teammates, going through the fast food line after practices, and I'm like, it doesn't have to be like that's like in the quality and convenience spectrum. Often the quality convenience trade-off is too great, and so
it's definitely not
Maamos
ideal.
Kitchen was. Yeah. So Maamos Kitchen was designed to have a unique, variation of that trade-off. And what we did was we made scratch-made meals, sturdy proteins and sturdy veg that could handle a reheat. And we would compose these meals into microwavable containers. So literally within minutes, a meal could be ready and is infinitely better than the highly processed, quick serve restaurant output. And so whether you ate it before or after practice, it was just very flexible, very nimble. And it functioned. We just called it Maamos Kitchen because Mamo is the Finnish word for mother, and phonetically it sounds like mom. And we wanted to sort of promote the notion of raiding our fridge. Just like you raid your mother's fridge when you go home.
Yes.
And so just always high quality. I hate the word, but high quality leftovers. Food that had already been cooked and was ready to eat. And in fact, I had a mentor during this time period who actually posed that question to me in our first meeting. He's like, so basically you're selling leftovers? And
I love
was
it.
like, yeah, actually, yeah. And I actually think my leftovers are better than, a quarter pounder with cheese. So the challenge with the first, Maamos Kitchen actually had two chapters. One was the brick and mortar version where we were doing these reheatable meals. That one I bootstrapped out of my own pocket. And long story short, we only had a couple of semi-profitable months out of the first 12, and I was burning cash too fast, and I got scared, and we shut it down. If I had a magic wand and could get a do-over, the fundamental thing that I would change is I would have held the idea hostage until I could get a partner who had food experience and who could match my equity. We would have doubled our capital runway. We probably would have located it in a different location. And those two things, along with just the overall experience that they had in the industry, probably could have got us to profitability. And there are businesses out there that are doing this kind of value proposition, and they've existed before and still. So I think that the idea itself was not a bad one. It was executionally, we just didn't quite get there. We executed the food piece of it and even the food economics piece of it very well. We had decent gross margins on our sales. We just our top line wasn't strong enough. So we closed it. I licked my wounds and liquidated all the equipment and got out of the lease. That took some time. And then I took another run at helping people get food on the table by pivoting the brand into grocer-based meal kits. And so it was a totally different idea. I went to our local independent grocer and I said, hey, HelloFresh and Home Chef and Blue Apron, I see all these boxes sitting out on trash day from these companies. These are sales that you could be getting that you're missing out on because of this trend of mail order meal kits. I'm like, you have everything under this roof can make almost an infinite number of different meals and recipes. So what if I build some things to help you address that? And so I created an easy pick and pack and prep system for the deli department to put everything that was needed for a given recipe in the bag. I created labeling that satisfied the Board of Health in terms of allergen listings and ingredients, and had a nice color photo of the finished dish, and sold it as a sort of a systems sale to grocers. And we had a couple of different grocers do it, but ultimately that idea did not achieve it didn't find product market fit because the labor involved in prepping some of the ingredients and picking and packing was more ultimately than grocers wanted to do. And they have a high turnover rate of their employee base. And so constantly having to train people on how to build a meal kit was more than they were prepared to do. So I stepped away from that idea as well. But I have to say, both of these chapters of the brick and mortar and the sort of service system sale ideas they forced me to flex all sorts of creative muscles. I had to learn photography to do food photography, and I had to meet with the Board of Health to say, okay, how can we do this in a way that will work for you guys? And so the amount of creative problem solving that went into both of those chapters of my life were extremely gratifying. And I would say the people side of it was the most gratifying. The team that I built at the first version of Maamos Kitchen really bought into what we were trying to do for people. And while we didn't have quite enough customers, the customers we did have were heartbroken when I announced we were closing. And there was a real it was like calling hours the last few weeks. And so it's like it could have, I learned a ton.
Yeah, and that is really just timing, because there are some companies that have made. I don't know how well Blue Apron and all those are doing right now. I know during the pandemic they went struggling like crazy, but and I've tried it, but I didn't stick with it. So it's really kind of hard to say. But I think there is something there because there's been enough companies that have tried it, and it could again just be kind of like a timing thing for a lot of people because you can't beat the convenience and the quality and things like that. So it's just figuring out.
I have to say, during COVID, when everything was takeout, like I was like, oh, if we had just opened 2 years later, we would have been right in the sweet spot of, that could have made a huge difference in overcoming maybe some of my shortcomings as a bootstrapped, startup founder.
But as an entrepreneur,
you can't plan for that.
As an entrepreneur, though, you really can't help yourself with trying to invent things and reinvent things. And you even still have another thing you're kind of working on that is also creative and fun. So let's talk a little bit about stand-up.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes all the way back to Maamos Kitchen. One of the things I started during that phase was a weekly newsletter that went to customers. And I would write a little, 400 or 500 word essay that was kind of like Garrison Keillor-esque and Lake Wobegon, and kind of like what's going on in our small town. And it would include a Sunday supper recipe recommendation that was not time efficient. It was the kind of thing you'd do if you had a lot of time on a Sunday.
Right.
And a Sunday music recommendation. So it was kind of a cultural piece.
Oh my gosh.
And even after closing the business, I have like 600 subscribers to this email. And now I just call it my weekly essay. It's no longer the Maamos Kitchen newsletter. But that got me thinking about writing and trying to figure out a way to earn income as a writer. And one variation of that idea would be to write for, screenplays or television, or write for the entertainment industry. And so I thought, well, I fancy myself as having a decent sense of humor, and I'm a big fan of comedy. And so I have done some stand-up lately, 5 minutes at a time in open mics around Central Ohio. That's one thing I had to get over was, the chance that somebody I knew might might witness my attempts at humor.
Right.
But it's years ago I had done it on kind of on a dare in Chicago, and since I was out of town and
Oh, wow.
unlikely to, it was a little less risky, de-risked by geography, but now I am working on material just to sort of develop my funny muscle.
And I really like, there's something just so interesting about you just constantly trying to reinvent, constantly, creative problem solving, constantly, kind of tickling this whole creative genius that is clearly in there. And it may be a matter of, there's just something that's going to totally resonate and take off, or you're going to just keep doing all sorts of little fun things to kind of add to your life story. It's like, well, then he opened he opened up a food company, and then he did some stand up, and then he wrote a script, and and there's something that's just really kind of cool. And I don't know if your kids find that exciting, but I think that's kind of cool that you have tried a whole bunch of different things now that you have had an established company.
Yeah, the kid piece of it is important to me. Like it was, I think, great for my boys to see something start and end, within a time frame, and to see the approach that I took to ending it professionally. A lot of, it could have gone, it could have had, I gave customers like 6 weeks notice. I'm like, hey, everybody who bought gift cards over the holidays, this is your chance to use them.
Yes.
We are going to go out of business, but we'll stay open as long as people keep coming in. And I feel like we really wound it down with grace.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And the boys got to see, I have 2 sons, and they got to see that, failure is not fatal, and that trying things and having them not work out is okay. And they also see that I'm persisting and doing other things and moving on, and it's not a big pity party. I think it's really important.
No, I think it's great and really, really commendable. To just,
they will probably do even more things than I've done in terms of variety of career.
So they're like, well, let's just give it a shot. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll try something else, which I think is a great spirit to have when you are trying to just kind of find your place in the world. But you have definitely done great things with the White Rock Media, and have created a great company, a nice sustainable company that now allows you to have, some fun too, which I think is like just a well-rounded life. So it's kind of cool.
I'm a super lucky guy. The ability to chase down these ideas and dreams and try to skin new cats in new ways is a real privilege. It's a real privilege, and it's partially afforded by the fact I have a good, stable client list on the White Rock front. It's partially because I have a good, stable spouse who lets me indulge in some of these things.
Yeah, we'll do a hat tip to
I would say,
spouses.
yeah. I mean, the stress of business failure can ruin marriages, and in our case, it didn't come close to that. Because Lori was heavily involved in everything. She knew exactly what we were trying to do, and she knew exactly what the results were, and we were in constant consultation throughout that first year, and it, in many ways it strengthened our relationship, I think.
Well, Neal, you have a fantastic story, and I really, really appreciate you being on the podcast and sharing it, because I think there are a lot of lessons and a lot of analogies that I totally loved that you also threw in there too. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. I think you're going to really help people that listen, and I just can't wait to see what you're going to do next, because it's going to be something completely different and exciting. So good luck to whatever you try next. It's been It's been fun so far.
Well, thanks for having me on. I feel like I flap my gums too much, but it's
People can hear from me anytime. They hear from me every week, but they need to hear from you. So
I have great enthusiasm. So
no, I love
thanks
it.
for letting me share it.
I love it. Thank you again so much.
My pleasure. Take care.